Welcome to Uncomfortable Growth Uncut, where we celebrate those who defy fear, embrace growth, and live without regret. We rarely hear about the challenges, fears, and crossroads that successful leaders grapple with across work and life. Uncomfortable Growth Uncut shines a light on their personal story and the critical human skills we all need today to turn ongoing tough trials into triumph. In this episode, we explore uncomfortable growth with Philippa Moig, Group Business Director at PhD. Philippa shares a pivotal career moment that led her to reflect deeply on her professional and personal life. From leading a large team to balancing work and family, Philippa's story is candid, thought-provoking, and inspiring. So I'm here today with the amazing Philippa Moig, who I've known now, it must be 5+ years, Philippa.
Yeah.
And she's currently the Group Business Director at PhD, and she's an amazing human. We've enjoyed many conversations, and so now I'm delighted to have her here on Uncomfortable Growth Uncut. So welcome, Philippa.
Thank you, Ro. Yeah, I'm really glad to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, such a pleasure. So what we start with is you sharing your uncomfortable growth story. So what would you like to share with us today?
I thought I might share with you one of those kind of key pivotal moments in that happen in someone's career. And so for me, it was I had been working on an account that I absolutely loved for about 3.5 years, and I loved everything about this client, the partnership. But after 3.5 years, I guess I didn't really feel as challenged anymore. And I think, you do know me quite well. Uncomfortable growth, I think we're genuinely not growing unless we are uncomfortable. So seeking that next, I guess, challenge and opportunity for growth was really important for me. So I had the opportunity to work and stay in the business and lead a pretty large new client. And I think, on paper, this was amazing. It was a team of 70 people, client stakeholder base of 250 people, and a really prestigious client and a great growth opportunity for me. But I think, as I said, on paper, this was all what I thought I had wanted for so long. But the realities of that experience were quite different for me. And it was a really great opportunity, I guess, to stop and reflect on the things that were really important in my life and take a more blended approach to my world, not just cookie cutter sort of work and my personal life. And that experience, I guess, really forced me to take a good hard look at that. It was, it was difficult and it was challenging, trying to lead, mobilize, motivate, and inspire 70 people who are also, you're in the trenches together. And if you're having a shit day, those people still need you to show up as a positive leader to get them through that. But my kids were also quite young and they needed me too. So that sort of tension that a lot of parents feel, but I think especially mums, was something that I was in conflict with throughout the course.
I love that you've brought this up, Philippa, because there are so many times where we look on paper and we go, tick, tick, tick,
I
tick,
made
tick,
it.
tick, yes, or like this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do. And it's only when we get into it that we start to see the cracks, or we start to realize I maybe didn't want this. And I'd love to kind of peel back the layers on this if we could, because I think there's so much insight in that. And I've had similar experiences as well, particularly, with my moves overseas, which also has a lot of like risk associated with it, but also it's not easy just to shift and change, right? Because you're in another country. So, and your visa is owned by, your company, etc. So I want to step back a little bit, if I could, and ask you a few questions. So,
Please.
because I also think it's true that we do look for new growth opportunities once we've, I guess, accomplished our current, once we've got the growth out of our current opportunity, we automatically kind of go into that comfort zone and we do look for
Yes.
something new. So tell me how you were feeling. Like, what was that feeling within yourself that you went, yeah, have loved this growth opportunity, but I'm kind of at the end of it now?
Yeah. Look, I think the first thing I would say is I really do believe that it's an individual's responsibility to grow themselves. And you can find that growth no matter your title or your role. But I do think, it starts to become more limited when you're in a specific role. And as I said, for me, that, I guess, sense of joy and content and like such a real privilege to be part of this amazing partnership, it was great, but I guess the only word I can use is I kind of yearned for something not bigger, but where I was going to feel more uncomfortable and challenged and have to adapt, be agile, learn new skills,
Mm.
manage and lead in a different way. And I think, the opportunity to grow and build something from the ground up by yourself and with the
Mm.
support, of your leadership, to build that was also quite a
Mm.
special thing. And as someone who is incredibly people oriented, and I get such a kick out of seeing other people grow and flourish and realize their own potential. For me, it was sort of like an opportunity that I knew I had to lean into. Like, I feel things, from a physiological point of view and a mental point of view, like it's actually
Mm.
feeling, and I knew I kind of had to lean into that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because and I call it the squirm, which is kind
Yes.
of that feeling, and it is physiological. It's kind of a physical feeling in your gut where you just know you're ready for something new, something more challenging. Even if you've
Yeah.
loved what you've been doing, and it's been amazing, you're just ready for something else. And I think that it's so important just to recognize that in ourselves when it's happening,
Yeah.
because that's when it's time. And, you know, that's when it's a new opportunity to start to explore what else you can do to grow. So I love that. But in this case, I guess it didn't turn out as well as what you thought it would on paper.
Yes.
So on that, tell me, what were the kind of first moments when you started to go, this is different to what I thought it was? So what was it that, made you think this is not what
Yeah.
I thought it was?
I think initially the task itself almost seemed impossible. It was an incredibly complex and dynamic and ever-changing situation with so many people having, a vested interest and such a different sort of dichotomy of clients. So I think overwhelm was, definitely in those early days, a sense of like, where do I even start? Like, how do I tackle this?
Mm,
And carrying that really deep sense of responsibility and care that
mm,
I had to these 70 people. One thing which I don't think it was a one of those kind of danger signals for me, but as someone who really does lean into connecting and building relationships with others, I
mm,
really struggled to get deep and have those relationships, which I'd always prided myself on,
mm,
with 70 people. It's impossible.
mhm.
And I think in that probably first 6 months or so, I also found myself just going, like, shit, I'm actually really struggling here. there's only so much of me that I can actually give to other
Mm.
people. And I really struggled with that. How much of me
Mm.
do I need to have spare and available, my time and my energy for me to just,
Mm.
keep my head above water for these 70 individuals who needed me? And then how am I still going home and giving something to my husband and my children who also need me? So that, I think, feeling pulled in so many directions was
Mm.
something I often wrestled with. And, I think I give shout out to like amazing leaders who manage to do that with absolute sort of grace and personalization at scale with so many employees. But, I think in reflection for me, it was probably finding that line of what is a reasonable amount to give
Mm.
and invest to be a great leader. And the key to unlocking that was having a really solid layer of leaders beneath me, so we were
Mm-hmm.
essentially building from the foundation up, but that took time to build. So I did genuinely feel like that responsibility sat with me for quite a long period of time.
Yeah, and that's a really tough position to be in because you feel responsible and you are putting in effort, but like you said, you can only put in so much effort. There's only 24 hours in a
Yeah,
day. And if you give all 24 hours of that, I know there's some sleep going on, but let's just say if you're
yeah,
giving it all to work, then there's nothing much left for home. And and also for the work that you needed to do, to think through how to lead the team. And I think that it's such a challenging dynamic when you kind of move into a role where you're not just managing, say, 15 people, but you're managing 70. That's such a different dynamic.
yeah,
And I'm not sure that the business community actually does a great job at overtly talking about the way you have to operate differently, or at
yeah,
least giving you the heads up, right? So it's like, yeah, you need to figure out how you would do it. But just so you know, the model of leadership for 15 people is very different to the
exactly.
model of leadership for 45 people, which is very different to the model of leadership required for 75 people.
Exactly. Yeah. I think also even being able to pivot that to say,
Mm.
like, where is this team at? And I love that
Mm.
bell call, the curve, sorry, of, um, forming, storming, norming, performing,
Mm-hmm.
that relativity of we were in those, like, in the trenches, and
Mm-hmm.
team of that size and creating the dynamic and culture, that's always going to be a 2-year journey. So
Mm-hmm.
I often reflect on that, the style of leadership that you need at a moment in time relative
Mm.
to where that team or where that relationship or partnership is.
Absolutely. And you're right. Like it's very different going into a team where those 70 people have been maybe working together already. And so as a team, they're at closer to the norming performing end rather than right at the start. So I think that that's also true because again, you were building relationships
Yes,
even amongst your team as well as with the client.
exactly. Yeah. And there's so many like reflections and learnings on what could I have done differently? What should I have done differently?
Mm.
And there's such richness in being able to reflect on that now. And if I was to
Mm.
do that same task again tomorrow, there are absolutely things that I would have done differently. And having that solid base to
Mm.
start with, I think is incredibly important. And I don't envy business leaders who are put in situations where you win a phenomenally huge piece of business and you
Mhm.
have to decide about strategically who is the talent that you're going to put on that. Are they new? Are they
Mm.
existing? Do you rip your best talent from other teams?
Mm.
Um, and none of those are necessarily the right or the wrong answers, but these are things that I now think about quite deeply. Whereas had I not had that experience, I probably wouldn't have had that time and space to reflect.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that there are a lot of people in the industry going, oh, what are your top 3 learnings, Philippa? Because when I'm in that situation, I'd really like a head start. So what would be the 3 things that you would reflect differently on or do differently if you were to walk into a similar scenario?
Yeah, so in terms of, I guess, having to build a large team at
Mm-hmm.
scale quickly,
Mm-hmm.
specifically,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, I think that strategic conversation about talent is important, and assessing, the pros and the cons and the risks and the rewards. Um, and obviously making sure that you're keeping equity and stability and continuity across your whole client base, right? Because no one client is more deserving of top talent necessarily than any others. So I think having a really deep strategic conversation about how you build that talent, what does it look like, what specific percentage of people must come from your organization or your holding group, what are the key capabilities that we might want to look outside of our organization for. We would often say we were flying the plane and building the plane at the same time. And when you're doing that, other things get missed. And I definitely would have had a much more solid, cohesive induction process because we were building the plane and flying the plane. It was like, okay, just like get in, find a seat, we're going. And that would have been quite difficult for a lot of people, and we were all doing the very best that we could. But even in those moments, I think about how do you use that time in a transition, not necessarily more effectively, but there are things that don't go on a client's transition plan in that 12 to 18 week transition plan, whatever it may be. They're not functional, they're not capability, they're not about building something, but they are the really important things that often processes, frameworks, the support and induction and onboarding of people to build a successful team culture and level performance quickly. The other thing that I learned, and I had some really great executive leaders who were so in it with me. I think that's a lesson. Whilst there were, I think maybe initially I'm like, shit, am I in this alone? Having a CEO and an MD who were in it with me. The lesson for me is that I would always want any of my team or leaders around me to feel that they are not in it alone. Like, as a joint effort, that's how you sift your way through it, and you put one building block in front of the other. There was one other which has just like popped out of my head right now. I know it will come back to me though. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. We'll pop back to it when it pops back in
Okay,
your
great.
head.
I'll let you know.
Yeah. No, great insights. And again, having gone through that, even though it was incredibly hard, you also learnt so much. And
Yes.
that's how I like to frame uncomfortable growth, because, and sometimes it's a bit more than uncomfortable because you're never quite sure when you lean into it, where on the spectrum it's going to be. But we learn so much through what's hard.
Yeah.
Or what's not known or not obvious. And you can look back and go, wow, if I was to walk into that situation, scenario, dynamic again,
Yeah.
I would have so much more insight and knowledge just because of what I've learned through the experience. And I don't think it's often things that you can just learn in a book, or you can't just learn some of these things through theory, because it's a complex system. And when you've got complexity in a system, it's not one thing, it's multiple things.
Yeah.
It really depends on, okay, so you've got to say a big team, but it also depends on the client side. How organized are they? Are they decentralized, or are they operating more as a cohesive single unit? It also depends on where their business is at, and is the work clearly scoped or not?
Yeah.
And coming from the
Yeah.
client side, I know the chaos can exist on both sides, and that has a big impact on how it unfolds, but also how you manage it. And that's why I say, I think you can learn principles from books. And
Yes.
me, Philippa, I love a framework.
Yeah. I
someone
know
said
you
to
do,
me,
Ro.
someone said to me the other day, your love language is frameworks.
Yes. I'm not adverse to a framework myself.
But the framework helps you think through the dynamics, but it doesn't always tell you what happens in practice,
That's
because
exactly right.
dynamics happen in practice. And when you've got a lot of complexity with dynamics, like bringing people in, creating a new team, having to transition, getting to know the client, getting to understand what they really need, below, next level down from what's been shared. And they're all complex dynamics. And so how they manifest can look very different. And leaders are much better able to navigate when they've had experiences of complex systems. So
I couldn't agree more. Told you it would pop back to me, and it did.
yeah.
There was actually one thing that you said, and two other things that I did want to mention was when you're dealing with that kind of complexity and scale, being able to understand very quickly your points of influence, especially from a client perspective, who are those key points of influence? And that is not always related to a person's title. Some, really, well, not really junior, but some junior marketers I've worked with are incredibly influential in the business. They have the ear of a lot of really important decision makers. So trying to navigate that part quite quickly. The main point that I wanted to go back to was around expectations. And I wrote something a little while ago which said, no one will ever expect more of themselves than I will. And I think coming from that previous team, which were such a well-oiled machine, it was such a culture and an ethos of high performance and evolution and curiosity. And in hindsight, they're, probably one of, not the issues, but one of the considerations was, can you have a team who are comprised of 95% high performers, because that's not always necessarily right. But I think in my head, I was like, I know what it looks like. I know how to build it. Now I'm going to go and do that from scratch again. And I severely misjudged the time that was needed to do that. And some really important people to me, my MD and someone who'd previously worked with me on that other business I mentioned, were like, Phil, you've really got to recalibrate your expectations for yourself and for your team, and how long that's going to take. And until I was in it, I couldn't really see that.
Yeah, it's a great example of theory, because you hadn't done a team from scratch of that scale. So the difference between theory versus reality.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, so many insights in that. So I'd like to ask you now just about the impact on your family life, because one of the things you brought up was just the difficulty that this also created with, what you had available to share with your family. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about that, because that's
Yeah. And look, I think I want to be really clear and start with saying that these decisions that we make around where, how, and who we spend our time with, they are 100% our own responsibility and accountability. And, I think sometimes in our industry, we do hear burnout, work, etc. It's a real thing, but each of us have to take responsibility for the role that we play in that. and I take 100% responsibility for the role and decisions that I made in
Mm,
that moment. Um, but I wanted to give everything I had to that
mm,
role and to my team and to the clients. And I definitely did deprioritize my family as a result of that. I think, you've only got so much time in the day, but energy to give. So
mm,
by the time I came home, the energy levels were so low because I'd expended them,
mhm,
at work and with clients and with the team. And so there wasn't a lot to give to my family. And I would push myself through and do late nights or be worrying about things. And I remember one morning it was like my daughter's birthday. I'm like, hey, quick, let's quickly go out for dinner. And then like go home, go to bed. And then I just woke up with like this sense of like, I've just got to get shit done. And so I just started working at 2 a.m. And again, that's of my own
mm,
deciding. But it was just things like that. I wasn't there. I wasn't present.
mm,
There were few kind of really meaningful, joyful downtime moments. And often my weekends were spent in recovery, getting enough
mm,
energy and resetting and gearing up for what was going to happen on Monday. So it was
mm,
like this cycle that I was in and that I was choosing not to get out of. I was like, that's
mm.
just how it's got to be, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and it did put pressure, on my relationship.
Mhm.
And like I remember one of my kids, they wrote, I think it was a Christmas note or something, and their wish was like, I hope that mum's computer breaks so she doesn't have to work and she can like spend time with us in the holidays.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, what
Mhm.
kind of a person am I?
Mm,
Um, so I just felt like there wasn't enough of me to go around. But
mm,
that was as a result of the decisions
mm.
that I was making.
Yeah. And I love your acknowledgement of that, because often we feel we have to do things, but when we step back, there are actually a lot of choices we can make differently. It's just that we don't like them for whatever reason. It's like, maybe I feel like I'm failing at this job, or maybe I'm not able to do it, or, we come up with lots of things in our minds as to why we can't make a different decision.
Mm,
But I also know from my own experience that sometimes when you're in it and you're exhausted, it's really hard to see the big picture.
yes.
Because you're just drive, 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 and you're waking up at 2 a.m. or whatever, like, and you're thinking about how can I do this and that and this and that, like you've got no space. And I think that's one of the hardest situations because there are big trade-offs that are not right, but being able to see that can be really difficult when you're in it.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point, Ro. And the other thing that I would build on from what you just
Mm,
said is when you're, running at 100% all of the time,
mm,
you don't make the best decisions all the time
mhm,
because you're not in the right headspace to do that. And my resilience became
mhm,
significantly lower, and I found
mhm,
myself breaking at silly things,
mhm,
and so I remember, time after I had, we'll get to that, but decided to
mhm.
not do that role anymore. And I sort of like looked back 7 months and I was like, oh, I haven't like cried or broken down once. So yeah, your ability to be resilient
Mm,
really becomes significantly diminished when you are in it, and it's incredibly
mm.
difficult to see your way out of it.
Yeah, yeah, because you're just running and running and running, and yeah, you don't have that ability to step back and go, "Oh, hold on, this doesn't necessarily make sense."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. So, how did you get out of it? Like what was there a particular thing that happened, or like, yeah, how did you go, okay, this is not working?
Yeah. Well, look, I love that question. And it was coming to the realization
Mm,
that I can absolutely do this job. I have the capability, I have the confidence, I have the people around me, etc. I
mm,
can do this job, but I'm going to make a decision for me and for my
mm,
family that
mhm,
I choose not to do it.
mm,
And I actually resigned without a job to go to, which is a pretty scary situation to be in when
mhm,
you're the breadwinner. And the business was incredibly supportive, and ultimately I ended up staying in the same holding group. But when you're in it,
mhm,
there's no certainty. I would call people up and be like, shit, I'm going to be destitute, like, have I made such a stupid decision? But I
mhm,
think getting really clear on my values
mm,
and what I was and was not willing to compromise kind of
mm,
became my North Star in the end. And
mm,
things like, my children, having balance, having time and space to have moments of joy and
mm,
find those meaningful times to connect, that
mm,
became more important than the title and the kudos that comes, with leading one of Australia's biggest accounts. So I think it was feeling empowered and confident to make
mm,
a decision that was right for me and right for my family. And I am as ambitious and tenacious and continually looking for those opportunities to learn
mm,
as I was back then. But I now look at things through a lens of these are my values.
mm,
Is this opportunity, this role, whatever it might be, is that congruent to my values and how I want to live my life? Because if it's not, then I'm really comfortable to say no.
mm. So that's also a huge positive that's come out, like clarity
Absolutely.
around what's important and
Yeah.
what are the non-negotiables versus the negotiables.
Yes,
That's fantastic. Um, you're such a values-driven person.
I am.
So
Maybe sometimes to my detriment.
you're a very values-driven person. And there's not that many people who talk about their values in their day-to-day.
Yeah.
Like often they're there, but you also talk about yours. So like would you mind sharing your values and how they helped you make that decision?
Yeah, I think I don't know if these are my values, but when I describe myself
Uh-huh.
or when other people describe me, positivity, passion, purpose,
Uh-huh.
they are, I guess, the sort of three P's, which are Philippa. And anyone who knows me,
Which
I
has a
think,
P.
yeah,
Four
that's
P's.
they're the things that are really important to me. And I spend like a lot of my time in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space,
Mm,
and in the allyship space. And creating spaces of inclusion and belonging are incredibly important for me. And I think they really help us be better people, more empathetic, more compassionate. Um, I would say purpose, passion, and positivity.
mm,
And again, that the purpose part can be a double-edged sword because you are like continually looking at things, opportunities, whatever through that lens. Down to when I was making the decisions I was making about my next step, it was getting really deep on the clients. Who
mm,
are those clients? What do they care about? Do they put their
mm,
money where their mouth is? Do they put their
mm,
money where their mouth is when it comes to DE and I?
mm,
Um, so I think that sense of kind of authenticity and being genuine and meaningful, and honest to build trustful and deep and strong relationships. Relationships
mm,
is another huge driver for me. And again, that previous role, which is, it is an amazing role, but it was incredibly operational.
mm,
And
mm,
for someone who's deeply relationship oriented, that was also kind of incongruent to the type of person I am and how I
Mm,
like to build relationships and get to know people and clients'
mm,
businesses. I don't know if
mm.
I answered your question, but
I think you did. No, you did, because it was very clear about what was important to you,
yes,
and how you know when it's right. And also, you've got a lot more clarity around what that looks like or
yes,
doesn't look like. Like you
yes,
said, it's, that was an operational role, not the best role for you.
yeah. And I think even where you don't see those opportunities necessarily,
Mhm.
it's does that opportunity provide me with the potential to create positive impact in those areas? So it
Mm,
doesn't have to be pre-existing. It
mm,
simply is that company, group of people, or leadership open and willing to spend energy and time in this area.
yep.
Because for me, being the driver of those things is really exciting. It's just there the opportunity and the endorsement to bring some of those things into an organization?
Yeah. And for some of our listeners who are younger,
Yes.
you know, the thing I like to, celebrate is we find out more and more about ourselves as we are tested.
Yes.
And because I know purpose is important to so many people, but we don't always know what that looks like. We don't always know what that is. Or maybe we've got kind of like an idea it's in this area, but it's when we take action and we step into situations that test us that we actually get that clarity and nuance and definition, which is what you just explored. I
Yeah.
often think about this as, those, home shows, whether it's Love It or Listed or Selling Houses Australia, and people
Yeah.
start off with their brief and they're like, I want 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms and a big deck. And then they take them and they show them the first house, which is exactly what they had. And they're like, not quite. And then they'll show
Yeah.
them a second or a third. And suddenly they'll be like, oh, no, that's the one I like. And it
Yes.
doesn't have 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a deck. It actually has some different things,
Yes.
but it's because it's tested,
Yeah.
in execution. And what is it that is most valuable, most important to you, all things considered? And I think
Yeah.
that that's the
Absolutely.
beauty of what you've been sharing today, Phil, which is, you know, a really uncomfortable growth scenario and situation, but it has given you so much clarity and focus
Absolutely. Yeah.
for work and home.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I probably haven't thought about it in as deeply as what we're sort of getting into now, but I'm much clearer in, I think, who I am and where I can add value to businesses, to clients, to situations. Um, and again, the other part of that is, what are the things that are perhaps incongruent to the type of leader I am, and being really honest about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's wonderful, because it's about knowing yourself so you can grow yourself.
That is it. Great. If you haven't read it, I do. I love that book.
Oh, so I'm going to finish off with some quick fire questions.
Ask away.
Okay, so first one, what are 3 things you've learned about yourself in recent years?
Um, I think the first one would just be like, just be yourself. I'm now at a place where I'm really comfortable in my own skin, and we all deal with imposter syndrome. But if I could fast track those 15 years of where I struggled with it, it's just be yourself. That's always going to be the best body version of who you are. So that would be my number one. Number two is, I think people are far more capable of doing things than what they give themselves credit for. Really, like what seems impossible, and going through, coaching, etc., with you, what often seems impossible or beyond the reaches of, our horizon and our world, until you give it a crack and until you do it, it just, that to me is incredibly surprising. And I think women especially don't give themselves enough credit in this space. women are so much more capable of what they give themselves credit for. And I think the third thing would probably be, I think going back to values. I am passion, purpose, positivity, and I am incredibly comfortable to live my life, my whole system, personal, private, professional life, in congruency to those values.
Beautiful. I love all of that. Okay, next question.
Yeah.
What is important to you at the moment in your life?
Yeah. Look, there's a couple of things, but I think like the community aspect. We've all got communities within our agencies or organizations, but like the Marketing Academy community for me is one which has absolutely enriched my life, and I get so much from it, and I love to give as much as I can. Like the richness in like beautiful relationships and dynamic conversations, and I have had so many the most random conversations which like open up your life and change how you think, and so I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I think on a more personal note, I turned 40. No, I turned 41 actually the other day. But it was about challenging myself in a completely different way. So I started CrossFit, which is like pretty hardcore. And I'm doing a competition later this year. And that ability to learn, acquire, and develop skills which are completely different to our professional realm for me have been incredibly rewarding. And like getting uncomfortable, like walking into new spaces with new people and having to learn new skills has been like equally scary but really rewarding. So I spend like a lot of my time, and my goals are oriented around my personal life and my health, and working towards a goal, and then doing this competition. So yeah.
Wow. I am so impressed. CrossFit is full on.
It is full on. You should come to the competition.
I'll come to the competition. I actually know some other people.
Yeah.
And when they tell me about what they do at CrossFit, I'm like, oh my goodness. Are you serious?
It's great. I love it.
Next level. I do F45. That's a lot for me. I do. Okay, last question.
Yes.
What is a current fear, inspiration, and challenge for you at the moment? So we've got fear, inspiration, and challenge.
Fear, I would say, might be I don't know. It's probably finding that thing, and I don't think it's necessarily like now, but let's go in the next sort of 5 years. What is that thing that I'm going to be able to go absolutely all in on and give everything I have to, that I'm so just completely lit up by. So that could be kind of work and personal. I don't know what it is, but I know that there is that yearning again and moving towards something which just like lights me up in a way that I can then share that and positively impact others. So could be in the D&I space, allyship, I don't know, but I think my fear is that I don't go down that path.
Yeah.
So that was fear.
Yeah.
Now the other one was
inspiration and challenge.
Current inspiration. Current inspiration for me, I would actually say, is probably my 7-year-old daughter. And for anyone that knows her, she's like out there. She's nuts. But this year she got diagnosed as being neurodivergent and having ADHD. And for me, going through that experience with her and really going, hey, I've got something really unique and special about me, and making sure that she sees that as her uniqueness and her superpower and not her weakness. That experience with her has sparked beautiful conversations in PhD in the industry about so many amazing neurodivergent people in our industry really embracing that uniqueness as their superpower and not their weakness. So that's been a real inspiration, and hearing people share their stories and experiences, I think, has been like really beautiful. And the last one, challenge. Look, my challenge is probably that I am in peak physical condition to not F this competition up. And so that's probably, that's a mental and a physical challenge, but one that I'm really into and invested in.
Committed,
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
committed.
yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Phil. This has been an amazing conversation. And I just want to thank you for your energy. I
Thank
feel
you.
so inspired and energized by your openness and honesty.
Yeah, it's always like such a pleasure to share like time, space, and energy with you, Rose. So yeah, I really appreciate you talking to me.
Bye.
Bye.
If you are inspired but thinking, I can't do that, then you are so wrong. Anyone can learn the art of uncomfortable growth with the help of my flagship program, Uncomfortable Growth, Own Your Reinvention. In this, you will learn to navigate your own internal contradictions to finally unlock the courage and commitment to live a deeply meaningful life by design and on your terms. Uncomfortable growth is about the struggle and joy in discovering who you are, what you truly want, and how to make it happen. If this is something you are ready for, then find out more at www.rowenamillward.com. What have you got to lose, or more importantly, gain?